Chapter 211. Big Brass. The room was silent for a few long seconds as the king slowly got to his feet. "You impudent wretch, how dare you?" The king's voice was soft, but deadly as he stalked down from the throne. However, Thorvald didn't back down. "I have made my claim, and I meant every word of it," he insisted, all of the flamboyant buffoon persona stripped away as he squared his shoulders to uphold his tarnished honor. Duke Saldoc simply looked disgusted by the entire situation. The purity and chastity of a royal bride was generally unquestionable. If any such incident had happened in the past, she would have been forced to wed to avoid public shaming, but Thorvald had dared to do something so audacious in public. Once word got out, the king of Bostoveria wouldn't bless their union until Thorvald was dead. But for Duke Saldoc, this was nothing more than a political deal. Sealing a trade alliance with Signia through the influence granted as a son-in-law. He had no particular interest in the princess herself, other than for her influence. But that didn't mean he was not enraged by Thorvald screwing everything up at the last second. "We will resolve this in private. The three of you follow me. The rest of you are dismissed. Enjoy the festivities," the king declared, then dragged Thorvald out of the room by his ear, while the delinquent nobleman smiled at Princess Josephine, who slapped him across the face, then smiled back at him. Alexis grabbed Dominic by the hand and dragged him back down the hall to her suite, with her royal guard detachment falling in behind them. The second that the door was closed and latched, Alexis turned on Dominic. "Goddess, can you believe it? Thorvald of all people. Thorvald. Father is going to kill him, then order him resurrected, so that he can kill him again," she gushed, waving her hands in excitement. "That man had better bring healing potions to his own wedding." Dominic agreed. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation, and Colonel Wilkes stepped into the suite, along with the other 9 members of the royal guard. "Your Highness, no gossiping without us," the colonel joked, then patted the princess on her armored shoulder. "It's good to see you back home safely. What happened to the Natural Sons Regiment?" he asked. "The Crown Prince asked them to remain in Albrols. The city is informally under occupation, as the regiment is providing security to the palace during the transition. Viscount Boscombe is now King Gustav IX, but it is highly likely that there will be a civil war beginning within Dagos before the month is over. Prince Kaizon has been stirring up trouble, and he's got the majority of the northern lords behind him," Alexis explained. Colonel Wilkes nodded. "That is understandable. We were instructed to ensure that you both knew that the king intends for you to depart in the morning again, headed for the estate he has granted you. We will accompany you this time, as we don't expect to come back to the palace until you are summoned again. I believe that there are maids gifted to you in your dowry as well, so be sure that we don't leave anyone behind when we go. They would be most distraught if they were left at the palace like an unwanted dress when you departed for the estate. Your marriage has been quite the topic of conversation lately, you know." Alexis chuckled. "I would imagine so. With the rushed nature, and of course the circumstances, the gossip mongers must have been going wild. You have no idea. It will be good to get away from the palace for some time. Did you want to pick up anything before we leave? Or would you like to have it all shipped to you later? The staff will pack your clothing and personal effects," Colonel Wilkes asked. "Is there a particular reason that we're being hurried out of the palace so quickly?" Alexis asked, and the colonel froze, unsure if he should answer that. "Your hesitation tells me that the answer is yes, so you might as well come out with it," she continued. The leader of her royal guard sighed, then nodded. "Yes, there has been significant instability in the region where your new holdings are. But that's only a part of it. The king wants his children all out of the palace during the negotiations, as he believes that there will be another major attack on the capital. Now that you are married and have duties outside the palace, he has the perfect excuse to send you away. If it were up to him, there would not have been a stopover here at all, and the airship would have dropped you directly at Westover. However, there are many foreign royals and nobles present, so a formal recognition was needed to ensure that they couldn't pretend to be unaware of your marriage and title. So, the delicate princess is being sent away to keep her out of politics," Alexis asked sarcastically. "Or so you don't stab anyone. Your sister already has on more than one occasion, and we are all aware that when the twins are together, the trouble multiplies. The colonel joked. There had to be more going on here than she was aware of. Many of the border barons in that portion of the country had been executed as traitors to the crown. The territory that they were given was essentially barren, abandoned for a decade, and now they were being rushed along out of the palace like unwanted visitors. Not like family, and certainly not like familiar faces who worked in the palace. Colonel Wilkes could tell that she wasn't convinced by his version of events, but he wasn't privy to all of the details behind the king's decisions, and with Princess Alexis away, his team only got news from the briefings secondhand from the other royal guards. They didn't deliberately keep secrets from the other royal guards, but it wasn't the same as having been there yourself. Chapter 2:12. Need to know type details. Ella, the lone female on Princess Alexis's royal guard detachment, moved up to smack the colonel on the head. You forgot to ask about the important things. First, we need to know, did you manage to avoid a major scandal without your maids? Second, is it true what they say about dragonkin and inhuman stamina? She demanded. Alexis rolled her eyes at the guard, then shrugged. It's really not hard to avoid scandal when you just behave as a traveling lower noble's wife. Even the Natural Sons Regiment didn't have any concerns about our arrangements after the first night. But how am I supposed to know the second part? Who am I supposed to compare it to? You, going through half of a city guard detachment in an evening. Ella frowned. You've got a point. Guard recruits are adorable, but they're terrible lovers. Perhaps we should get a few more of the boys married off, and then we can compare? Alexis chuckled. We can have some girls' time to catch up and compare notes later. But not in front of all these men. Let Duke Dominic brag to them if he must. The colonel raised a hand to stop that line of conversation. Thank you, but I don't need the personal details of your love life, Your Highness. The royal guards chuckled at the thought. It was good to see the princess happy, but they had still grown up with her, trained with her, learned the sword, and joined the royal order with her. If anything, it would be more like hearing about their little sister's romantic exploits than anything they could congratulate Dominic on. Well, if we're being run out of the palace first thing in the morning, we should probably turn in early. Dominic, was there anything that you still needed to get before we go? Alexis asked. Dominic shook his head. Nothing that we're going to be able to get on short notice. As long as we are gifted with the basics to equip the manor, I should be able to take care of the rest. I have the spells to make copper roofing and fieldstone walls. Those will take care of most of the structural repairs. Then we can start recruiting residents the moment that we get settled in. Assuming that they don't attack us on sight, that is. Colonel Wilkes chuckled at the notion. I don't think that we will have as many problems as you're thinking. Not once they find out who you are. The real problems will be when everyone who is not a native commoner finds out who you are. There are still quite a few noblemen left over from the old Wavemates kingdom, the ones who defected to Dagos before or during the attack and didn't have any of the Dragonkin bloodline. They're not going to be pleased to find out that you're back, and that you outrank them. There are no surviving dukes in Stantia province, other than yourself. So, you will be the highest-ranking nobleman in the region, and the most logical point of contact with the king, as Princess Alexis is there with you. But it would be inappropriate for the men to approach her directly. So, not only do we have to build a ducal estate from nothing, we have to do it before the other nobles start showing up? I should have known that there was a catch. Alright, I can work with that. A bit of magitech and some visual improvements will get us started well enough to put on appearances. I just hope that the manor house isn't in too terrible of shape. Dominic replied with a sigh. Apparently, it's quite well preserved. The unit that was stationed there during the later parts of the war did some cleaning while they were in the area. The real issue will be finding domestic staff before the first visitors arrive. I would suggest stopping along the way to find them, so that we arrive with all the household personnel that we need.
Colonel Wilkes suggested.
Princess Alexis nodded. We have to pass through Skypington, Darden, and Castle City on our way. One of those three is bound to have what we need. There are always domestic servants out of work, or those looking to become one. Colonel Wilkes hummed in interest. How did Wavemates do it before? I never had a reason to study the topic. Dominic shrugged. The same as Signia. Noble servant positions are somewhat hereditary, in that the one holding the position is responsible for choosing and training their replacement if they work to retirement. The head maid would choose the replacements for new hires, as most of the ladies would only work a few years before returning home to marry with their savings as a dowry. But the head maid herself, if she chose to marry and stay on, plus most of the outside staff, would just raise their own children for their positions. It really is much easier that way. The colonel frowned. So, you're saying that there might not be many qualified servants along the way, only the rejects? Dominic shook his head. No, there will be plenty of qualified staff candidates. Many will compete for the best positions, and only one can get them in every estate. So, there will be maids who did their best to become head maid and failed, cooks who were replaced when they lost the position of head chef for an estate, and many others. The most savvy will be employed already, but there is always hope to find a few qualified people within any city you visit. Colonel Wilkes nodded. That makes sense. My family home has only ever had 4 staff members, and we hire a gardener to come in. But I spent most of my life here in the palace, where servants regularly come and go. The employee turnover rate was mostly because they kept getting pregnant and needing to leave to start their family, but that was an entirely different matter. In the capital, it wasn't hard to find more staff. But in a smaller town, it was more likely that the local lord would either be the father of the maid's child, or willing to let them come back to work and place the child with a nursemaid or nanny. Chapter 213, Staffing Choices. Dominic brought out the plan for the domestic staff they would need at the manor, the one that he had made for the courtship trials, and showed it to the royal guard. These are what we will eventually need. But there are only a few that will be needed immediately. The head maid, the scullery maids, the cook, and the groom or farrier for the horses. Unless we're going to be taking a whole set of mechanical horses to the estate, we will definitely need someone to work with the horses. That is probably someone that we should try to find in the capital, though. Unfortunately, we only have one night's time to search. That does not make it easy to find a qualified person, he explained. Colonel Wilkes patted him on the shoulder. Fear not. I can find you a qualified cook and a farrier tonight who will be ready to go in the morning. Alexis gave him a dubious look, and the guard shrugged. I may have been sleeping with that girl Jasmine from the farrier's forge. Plus, you know that cook Beth has always had a soft spot for you. If we ask her to come along, she will certainly resign her spot in the kitchens to join the duchy as its head chef. Alexis smiled. Beth had been passed over for a kitchen management position every year for the last 15 years, but she had stayed in the kitchen, working the royal wing faithfully anyhow. Most chefs would have left the second or third time they were passed over like that. But she still made the twin princesses' favorite snacks every day, just in case they wanted some. All right, I will write up an invitation letter to show their managers so that they're not marked as having quit without a guarantee of new work by their managers. It won't be the first time a noble house stole away good staff, and it won't be the last. Alexis agreed. A few moments later, Wilkes left with the letters of employment, and a maid who had been at the door entered. Your Highness, I have the caravan contents list for you, she explained. The princess' eyebrows lifted with every line. Was she starting a new estate, or relocating her own? There were the expected dried provisions, a full set of kitchenware, of the sort that a military camp kitchen would have for feeding a regiment, then multiple beds, carpets, tables, chairs, even books. Not as many books as she would have hoped, but they were noted as a wedding gift from the local publishing houses. Then there was dishware, silverware, crystal glasses, and all of the sorts of domestic gifts that would be expected at the wedding of a lower noble who would also have to start his own estate from scratch. It appears that the nobles of Signia have taken good care of us, Dominic noted. They even donated all 3 trucks that it will take to move the goods. Those will be very useful in the future. Alexis agreed. 3 Magitech-powered steam trucks were a huge gift, even from a ranking noble to a princess. So, they might have come from a group, or have been arranged by the king's assistants using coin gifts sent by nobles who were unable to attend the capital for the wedding. A wedding that never happened in the capital, but it was still the appropriate place to send the gifts, given the circumstances. Well, it looks like we don't need to do any houseware shopping. We've got everything that we should need to get started in the manor. Dominic noted as he finished reading the list and comparing it to what they had come up with for the marriage trial. It was possible that the results of the trials had been used as a wedding registry so that the princess would have all that she needed when she departed with her new husband. That would have let the nobles pick the gifts long before the final decision was made, and they would have been suitable for any of the grooms. We should rest early. Here is some coin for the new hires so they can get what they need to leave in the morning. Tell them that we will provide everything that they need, in case they're leaving with nothing but a change of clothes. Alexis instructed. We will send in the ladies' maids. One of the guards agreed. Dominic winked at him.
Don't worry about it.
I can draw the bath and get the princess ready for bed. The royal guard chuckled. I will ensure that the soundproofing is active. Don't forget to close the door. Alexis rolled her eyes. They already filled the bath and set it to warm. But you are not keeping me up all night when we've got a long day ahead. Dominic made a kissing face at her, but the princess just laughed as she went to bathe. Well, a man can try. He whispered to the guards with a shrug. You're a brave man. You do remember that you're going to be sleeping beside her, right? Ella, the lone woman in the Princess Royal Guard team, asked. Don't worry, if there are serious injuries, I'm sure that I can convince her to heal me. Dominic went to the ensuite to shower and change for bed, then waited for Alexis to be ready. It didn't take long for the princess to arrive with her hair in a loose braid and still damp from the bath. Dominic stepped up behind her and slid the dressing gown off her shoulder, then kissed his way up her neck, from the collarbone to the earlobe. You're not playing fair. Alexis complained. That is true. But I only promised that I would let you sleep at a reasonable hour, not that I would keep my hands to myself. The princess giggled, then turned and pushed him backward onto the bed. Well, if that is the case, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to delay for just a little bit longer. Chapter 214. Hurried departure again. The next morning was a chaotic rush to get showered and dressed in time to get everything organized for their departure. The royal guard would be driving the trucks, and the colonel had managed to find 3 staff members to go with them. Cook Beth, Jasmine, the farrier, and a scullery maid named Liz. She was an indentured servant to the palace, as the king had paid her family's debts, and she still had years of wages left to pay them off. But the colonel had arranged to pay the exchequer and transfer her debts to Dominic, as Duke of Westover. It was a common enough thing, though most of the people who were working off a debt were working off fines for petty crimes, not their family's massive gambling debts as Liz was. Beth had recommended her, as even now, her family was pressuring her to give them the portion of her wages which didn't go to paying the debts they had accrued. Being away from the capital would be good for her. That was enough to get the household started, though the princess still intended to have them stop along the way and pick up a few more cleaning staff. Once she had staff that she could trust, she would promote a few of them to ladies' maids. Additional cleaning staff were certain to be essential to the first weeks, though. If the house had been full of soldiers, it was certain to be a mess, even if it was in serviceable condition. When they exited the royal quarters of the palace, it was time to say their goodbyes. But Dominic couldn't find Pops in his suite, despite the early hour. His next stop was the forge, but when Dominic stepped outside, the old dwarf was sitting on the step of one of the trucks, smoking his pipe.
Ah, there you are.
Pops, it's been a pleasure working as your apprentice.
Dominic began.
Pops snorted. Did you think it was that easy to get rid of me? I've leased the forge at the staging area to my nephew Corbin, and my gear is packed. They might have forced me to work at the palace for the war, but it's about over now. No harm in leaving for greener pastures. Dominic smiled. We might need another truck if you're packing all your gear. Pops chuckled and tapped the ash out of his pipe. I sold most of it to the boy. He will need it. But he's a proper mastersmith as well. The staging area won't be hurt by his presence, and the master armorer has agreed to take over the royal forge. Master gunsmith Jacob will be taking over as the weapons master in my place. Dominic nodded. It's an honor to have you with us, then. Perhaps the new estate won't struggle too much to get the farmers set up. I don't think that the kingdom has a better toolmaker. From behind him, Dominic heard a young woman laugh. Not only are you stealing my big sister, you're stealing my favorite cook and the mastersmith as well? You have made out like a bandit, Duke Westover. Princess Eleanor joked. Dominic bowed politely to the youngest princess. So it would seem. Perhaps now that the war is ending, they will let you rejoin your friends in the academy. Even schoolwork has to be better than being stuck in the palace all the time. Princess Eleanor huffed. Anything is better than being confined to the palace. I'm not even allowed out into the noble districts to visit friends or go shopping. I will be so happy when that restriction is over. But not having my big sisters around will be awful. You're stealing one, and Josephine might be going to West Kyria with Thorvald. I don't know what happened in the meeting yet, but Duke Saldoc looked enraged when he left. One of her guards cleared his throat, and the princess sighed. My governess says that gossip is an unsuitable pastime for a noble lady. Dominic nodded. Perhaps a popular one, but hardly seemly, I suppose. Princess Alexis will be here soon, though. If you want to send her off, just wait a little longer. The youngest princess sighed, then went to join Pops on the step of the truck. Forge Master, might I join you? I suspect that my sister will need some time to say her goodbyes. With a lifetime of acquaintances in the palace, she has far more people to meet this morning than Duke Wistover. She smirked a little as she used Dominic's title, and Pops patted her on the head. Things are changing, are they not? To think that when you first met, he was an apprentice smith, out hunting goblins for forge materials. The old dwarf joked. I wish I could go out hunting goblins again. Do you know how far behind my training is now that I'm not free to upgrade my trade skill? How am I supposed to reach rank 5 paladin if I can't go out and fight anything? She complained. Well, you can always keep practicing with the royal guard. Isn't that how the rest of the royal family had to do it when they weren't sneaking out of the city?
Pops asked.
Eleanor sighed heavily, doing her best to look the part of the mistreated princess locked in a castle. They used up all the good ways to sneak out. Now that I'm trying, the guards have seen all the tricks, and there is nothing new to them. I bet that my first and second brothers had it so easy. The royal guards chuckled at her annoyance. Highness, the first and second princes had to grow up with the guards who were familiar with the previous generation's attempts to sneak out of the palace. So, they were in the same position that you are. The head of her guard detachment explained. Well, that makes me feel a little better. But where is Alexis? They're going to come drag me back to lessons soon, and she's still not here. From the palace, the sound of armored boots marked the approach of someone important, and the youngest princess stood up with a hopeful smile on her face. But the one who arrived was not Alexis, but Josephine, accompanied by Lord Thorvald and her royal guards. Is Alexis not here yet? She must be at the barracks, saying goodbye to the order. I should have gone there first, the older twin announced with an annoyed frown. Apparently, everyone was waiting in the wrong spot today. Chapter 215, Smooth Departure. When Alexis did finally show up, it looked like she had half the paladin order with her. We should have known that you were stopping for one last drink with a paladin's little sister. Josephine laughed. Alexis rolled her eyes. It was barely dawn. She hadn't been drinking with them, just saying goodbye. Plus, she was only younger by half an hour. Is everything ready? It looks like everyone has come out to say goodbye. Alexis noted. Pops will be joining us at the estate. He has resigned his royal commission as Forge Master. But yes, everything is ready to go as soon as you are. Dominic agreed. Well, we've got nearly 3 days' worth of travel, even if the weather holds, so we might as well get a move on. I am certain that we will return before too long. After all, it's custom for all royals to return at least once a year, unless they're out of the country. Alexis agreed. Josephine pulled her into a hug, then whispered in her ear. Thorvald's insane tactic worked. Father changed the marriage arrangement. That made Alexis giggle. Keep him close. He's kind of dumb, in an adorable way. Alexis agreed. That made the royal guards laugh. Everyone took Thorvald as a somewhat lovable buffoon, with a penchant for letting his mouth get him in trouble. Josephine knew better, but she still agreed with Alexis. He was the adorable sort of dumb. With one final round of well wishes, Alexis' royal guards loaded into the trucks, and they began making their way out of the palace for a very long cross-country journey. Until the old castle city, they would have good upgraded roads to drive on, so they would make pretty good time. But after that, it was just country dirt roads between villages. They were far from straight, usually muddy and soft, and never suited to high-speed travel. Nobody cast the convoy a second glance as they left the city, as nobody recognized the emblem that had been created for the Duke of Westover. It was clear that it was an important position by the level of decoration, but nobody knew it. They didn't have the royal emblems for the princess on the carriages, and a random convoy of nobles and gear was so common these days it wasn't even worth noticing. All day long, open fields, small towns, and forests passed outside the windows as the convoy trundled down the stone road. There was very little traffic on the road, and what they did find was mostly farm wagons, who simply moved off the road rather than risking a confrontation with a noble who might unreasonably declare that they were in the way and insulting his position. Our stop for the night will be Skypington. Normally, we would go through the night, but we thought that it might be better to try to get a few final supplies that weren't available in the capital. Colonel Wilkes, who was driving their truck for the evening shift, explained. Princess Alexis nodded. That sounds good to me. I'm sure that everyone could use a good rest if you can find a proper inn to park at, where we can keep guard on the caravan. If not, we can set camp outside the city and send someone in tomorrow morning to get supplies. The colonel looked out at the fading light and sighed. I think that we will be setting up outside the city tonight. By the time that we get there, it will be long past dark, and I don't want to hunt for somewhere with space when we've got a fully loaded caravan. Long past dark was an understatement. By the time that they stopped at Skypington, it was nearly midnight. They had made good time, thanks to the relatively light loads in the trucks, but it was a long trip, and the road had been in worse condition than expected. With so much else going on, nobody had done any maintenance after the spring floods or during the summer rains. The Royal Guard set up camp for everyone, including the large round tent usually reserved for senior officers and traveling upper nobles. They had the process down to an art form, and the camp was set up within half an hour, but most of their passengers didn't need anything. The three ladies and Pops were all asleep along the benches of the carriage, so Dominic didn't bother to wake them. He just moved the sleeping form of Alexis to the tent with him and set a barrier over their bed for secure rest. If someone was looking to attack them, there would be no reason to look any further if they found the princess and Dominic in the tent as expected, and that would help keep everyone else safe. But nothing was coming to bother them in the dead of the night, and Dominic woke to the smell of oatmeal and cinnamon as the Royal Guard made breakfast, with the help of Beth, their new cook. Give it just a few minutes and I will have biscuits. I mix them up first thing, and they are baking over the fire, she explained as Dominic came out of the tent to check on the situation. Liz rushed into the tent, and Dominic cast her a curious look, then realized that she was taking on the role of lady's maid to Alexis, as the ones she had at the palace had been palace staff, not her own. That seemed odd to Dominic, but Alexis surely had a reason that she hadn't kept a trusted retainer or two with her in the palace. Unless the only ones she trusted were her royal guard. Biscuits didn't take long to bake, and Beth had made them in a huge square cast iron pan with a thick lid that had coals from the evening's fire stacked on top. Dominic assumed that was to help with even baking, and it certainly worked, as the entire tray of biscuits came out perfectly. A rare skill when cooking over a campfire. Who are we sending in for supplies? I have a short list of things that will make life easier. I don't think that we should grab new staff yet. Once we are within 100 kilometers of the estate, start looking for unwed daughters, widows, and others who need the work. It will make my kitchen run much more smoothly if we don't have to deal with the resentment of locals versus outsiders. Beth suggested. The woman had been working a kitchen longer than anyone else in the group, excluding Pops, had been alive. Not arguing with her was definitely the best way to get the kitchen working at maximum efficiency. Chapter 216. Travel Day. I will take the list into town. One of the guards insisted, and two others stood to join him. Be back in 2 hours. If you can't get what we need before then, we will get it at one of the other cities. Alexis instructed. Of course, Your Highness. All of these things are domestic wares. If we were in the capital, we would go to Pops to order them, so there should be someone who has them in stock. He replied. Pops chuckled around a spoonful of oatmeal. The lad has a point. I can make most of those items myself, once we arrive. But if the cook wants them right away, just go buy them. I will make new ones that fit the kitchen properly, once we know how much space she has to work with. Pops instructed. The matronly cook smiled as she realized that they had a willing master-smith with them to help with the essentials. The camp was quickly packed, and the trio of guardsmen who went into the city came back much faster than expected, which Dominic mistook as a good sign at first. Don't bother. The whole city is overrun with refugees. There is no stock of anything anywhere, and you can hardly walk in the streets. We might as well move on if we're not looking to take in some waifs to run the manor. The guard who had volunteered for the trip explained. We've got 2 major cities left to move through today. Do you think that they will be better or worse? Alexis asked. Castle City was under attack, so it's likely to be where many of these refugees came from. But if they made it this far, then Darden is likely so overrun with refugees that they're turning people away. Colonel Wilkes guessed. In that case, these are either the troublemakers who are run out of Darden or the motivated, who are making their way to better chances of work. I know that you wanted locals for the kitchen, Beth, but we could grab a few domestic staff for cleaning here. Alexis decided. The cook bowed in acceptance, and Dominic stood up from the folding camp stool. All right, why don't I take Pops, and we will go look for maids? Or did you want to come and choose them in person? He asked. Take Liz with you. She will have a better eye for which candidates are likely to try to cause drama or sneak into beds not their own. Dominic nodded and waited for Pops to rinse off his plate so that he could join them. I will keep my eye out for a few skilled craftsmen as well. They're harder to come by, but they might be among the refugees. If we can recruit them here, it will be much easier than after we're settled. Maids and laborers you can find anywhere. Hell, you can buy debt contracts in any major city. But skilled tradesmen are another thing, and we're going to need carpenters to rebuild the village, even with the magic Dominic has. The old dwarf explained.
All right.
We can make space for a half-dozen or more. Get who you need. You've read the budget that we're working with. It's the same one Dominic wrote for the king's trials. Alexis agreed. Dominic nodded and led the way to the city. The presence of the 3 of them, even though none of them were dressed in a particularly flashy way, was enough to draw the immediate attention of hundreds of refugees. Some wanting to get an update on the events of the war, others desperate for some way out of the refugee camps that had taken over the slums. Dominic noticed a group of women in household servant outfits, somewhat worn but clean. But when he looked at Liz, she shook her head. Those are not servants. She whispered. I might not be the most worldly man, but they didn't look like prostitutes to me. Dominic replied, which made both Pops and Liz laugh. Liz smirked as she replied. Oh, they'd slap you for even suggesting that. Those are all noble daughters. Either they lost their family, were run off by their husbands, or fled when their family turned traitor. It's the only way that they would have escaped being executed along with the rest of their household. But while they might look like they want work, what they really want is to climb back up the social ladder. If you took even one in, you would never have a day of peace in your household again. Pops nodded. If you want to keep your wife happy, pick cleaners too old to be looking for a husband, but too young for their bodies to be complaining about the work. And pick the ugly ones. The ugly ones are always less trouble with the Lord, but more trouble with the guards and stable hands. Liz giggled and shrugged. I won't deny that. The fewer teeth they have, the more likely you are to find them in the stables when they're late for work. Then Pop stepped aside and grabbed something that was hidden behind a wooden shipping pallet. It turned out to be a woman in her mid-30s, with a veil over her face and a patched coat over a simple dress. Definitely a farm wife, Dominic decided. He would recognize that particularly muscular build anywhere. You didn't get that cleaning a manor, you got that build tossing hay and carrying sacks of grain. Woman, are you looking for work? My lord is looking for reliable staff for the manor and yard. The old dwarf demanded in a gruff tone. The woman gave him an assessing look, then spat at his feet and nodded. I won't object to working a nobleman's garden, so long as he's not a handsy sort. She agreed. Liz smiled at Dominic. I like this one. Then we've found ourselves a gardener. Now, we just need a few reliable cleaners. Dominic agreed. The woman looked Dominic up and down, then paused at his horns. A dragonkin lord? She asked. The new Duke of Westover. Dominic agreed. He could see that she was calculating how far that was from where she started by the way that she drew a mental map in the air before she nodded in satisfaction. Whether it was close enough or far enough from where she had started, he did not know. But it didn't change her mind. Chapter 217. Debt Contracts. If you want reliable maids, hit the slave market, the ragged woman suggested. Pardon? Dominic asked. The debt contract sales, Your Grace. You see, most of the refugees here have nothing but hungry families and outstanding debts. Every day, they hold sales, looking to raise funding in exchange for a worker's debt contract. Now, most of the buyers aren't some noble lord looking for honest employees, if you catch my meaning. And with no real work, how long do you think it will take to pay off that debt? She asked. Dominic nodded. I will send a message to the capital. They will have to take action before it gets too out of hand. But what is your name, and do you have family here we will need to bring? I am Tenna, a widow from Kilksea Lake. My children are already grown and scattered to the winds. She replied.
All right.
Lead the way, and you can help Pops and Liz pick out a few who look like they won't cause drama. My wife is not forgiving of flirts, so don't pick anyone whose blood we will have to wash out of the carpets the first week. Dominic warned. Tenna led them through the crowded streets past the market where the men must have gotten their supplies last night. There was a little bit of everything available, but the city was short on two essential factors: food and shelter. Tenna stopped at a large auction market, which was still set up for selling livestock, complete with straw on the ground. But instead of livestock, there were defeated-looking refugees with signs gathered around the edge. Each had a currency amount on it, and some had information about work skills on them. Pops nodded when he found a middle-aged man with a slightly hunched back and thickly calloused hands. He was sitting on a toolbox, so he hadn't lost everything yet. But he was definitely desperate. His sign said he was a carpenter and was looking for 500 silver coins. That was a lot of money, years' worth of wages for a working man, and Dominic wondered what sort of trouble the man had gotten himself into. Carpenter, is it? What's your story? A gambler? Dominic asked. The man shook his head. I served with Baron Khalid's militia, but the barony was overrun by the time that we got home. My wife and daughters are here in town, working under debt contracts. I need the whole 500 to buy them back. Dominic considered whether it would be worth it to bring this man's whole family with them. The price was high, but if the rest of the family was worth it, they might get reliable workers out of it. Let's go see the debt holder for your family. I might be able to work something out. Dominic agreed. The carpenter led them to a large building, and Dominic inwardly smiled. The debt holder was the Merchants' Guild. Welcome, sir. I'm sorry, but your subordinate is prohibited from this establishment. We can help you if he waits outside. The security guard greeted Dominic. Welcome, Lord Wavemates. His hand gestures said. I understand. Many become emotional when they are in a tight position. I will ask him to wait at the door and not cause a scene. Dominic replied. I want to hire the carpenter, but he wishes to buy out his family's contracts as a requirement to come to Westover. Dominic signed back. We should speak in private. The guard agreed, then gestured for a manager to come over and meet them. Pops placed a hand on the carpenter's shoulder, stopping him from coming in and making a scene. Liz followed silently as Dominic left the room, while the others waited outside. Nothing was said until they were in a private room, and then the manager turned and bowed to Dominic. I hear that you have earned yourself a new title, my lord. Congratulations on your wedding. The manager began, then took a seat on one of the comfortable sofas and began to pour rum into a pair of tumblers. News travels fast. Though it would seem that I have been gaining titles left and right lately. Did you know that the Dagos nobles have their own for me? The Merchant Guild manager smiled. The Butcher of Westover. Ironic, considering that you are now also the Duke of Westover. Are you actually intending to live there? Or just establish a household? If that's the case, I can recommend a castellan to do the day-to-day management. They are a guild member, but can be trusted to be loyal to a Wavemates noble. Dominic nodded. I may take you up on that, but I have a more urgent need for a skilled carpenter, and I believe the one I found should have the skills. The manager nodded. He has the skills. Not the attitude, though. How did the debt get that large? Even if he had a whole family of beauties for the brothel, 500 coins is a lot. Dominic signed as the manager spoke. It's 100 plus penalties and damage to the property. If you agree to take the whole family away and never let them return, I will waive the penalties. Dominic sighed. Troublesome workers are never truly desirable. But the whole village needs rebuilding, and that's a lot of carpentry to keep him out of trouble. Tell me about the family. The castellan that I have in mind has been with the guild for 30 years as an accountant. He was once a branch manager, but chose to step back during a power struggle. The manager replied, as you guessed, a wife and 4 beautiful daughters. They ruin their faces before they arrived here, but the servers in the executive lounge wear veils. None will be a blushing virgin bride, but we didn't sell them to a brothel. Dominic nodded. If he's available, I would like to meet him. Even though I will be in residence at the manor, so having someone to do all the math for me will save many headaches. I trust that if he wasn't an honest accountant, he would be a dead accountant by now. The merchant guild might not be a crime syndicate, but they weren't known to tolerate traitors or thieves. Chapter 218. Castellan Julio. The manager motioned to someone at the door, and a moment later, a whip-thin man in his later middle years with silver hair at his temples and sideways slitted eyes that spoke of non-human heritage entered. Manager, how may I be of assistance? He asked. Julio, Duke Westover is looking for a castellan, and I thought that it might be a good opportunity for you. The manager's hands said the exact same thing, confirming that it wasn't a trick. The accountant smiled as he noticed Dominic, then bowed politely. I have heard much about you, my lord. Will this be a long-term request? Or a transitional position during the rebuilding? He asked. Long-term. Dominic agreed. With the chance to make the role hereditary if you have a trained heir. The accountant nodded. I would be honored to join you. Are you taking that mad carpenter's family? The wife is broken. Her mind is about gone. Does the guild have a work contract on hand? I like to put everything in writing. Dominic agreed. He can deal with her issues when they arrive. The carpenter isn't house staff, just as long as the daughters aren't trouble. As they were silently speaking, the women in question were brought into the room with veils covering their faces, but Dominic had no problem determining which was the mother. Her posture was off, as if she was staring into space, and while her eyes had thin cloth over them, he could still see the age wrinkles around them that the others lacked. The manager cleared his throat. Ladies, the Duke of Westover has purchased your debt contracts today. You will work for him until your debts are paid. However, the Duke is a kind man, and he has agreed to hire your father as a skilled tradesman. That should greatly reduce the time needed to pay your debts. Greet your new employer and gather your belongings. Thank you, my lord. We are grateful for your consideration. Did our father find you? One of the girls asked. Dominic nodded. He was at the auction looking for funding. He had skills that my household needed, so I will be taking you in as cleaners. Your father may pay off your mother's debts on her behalf. The girls curtsied, and Liz shot Dominic an annoyed glance. What was the point of bringing her, if she wasn't even going to get to vet the ladies? Liz, go with them, and help them carry their goods. Dominic instructed. She could talk to them privately, and Dominic would find a new role for them if they weren't suitable. The Merchant Guild's assistant brought out a work contract, and Dominic carefully read it over, then filled in the offered wage, as he remembered it from their budgeting session. Then he passed it to Julio, who read through it, then signed at the bottom. I will pack my goods for the next few weeks, and arrange for the rest of my belongings to be sent along with the next guild convoy. Julio announced, then extended his hand to shake Dominic's. That works for me. We will be renovating everything, so it's better to not have too much to unpack the day we arrive. Dominic agreed. I understand, Your Grace. I don't have too many essential items, but I do have a few heirloom pieces that won't be convenient to transport today. Julio explained. Liz returned a few minutes later with the rest of their new hires and a determined look on her face. She nodded in approval at Dominic, and her position said that she was feeling protective of the new maids. That should be a good sign, Dominic thought. If the scullery maid and the cleaning maids got along, they could all work together. Initially, he had hoped that the mother might be an option for their first head maid, but she still looked like she was lost in her own little world. Dominic took out a level 5 uncommon grade mana revolver made with a clay to steel process and placed it on the table next to the tea set. Does this cover the debts and the referral fee for Julio? Dominic asked. The manager smiled. And then some. It will also cover the shipment of his remaining belongings. I know what he needs sent to him. They had gathered more people than they had come for, Dominic realized as he led the procession through the city. They hadn't intended to get more than 6 people, due to the space that they had remaining in the carriages, but he had ended up with 8 in total. That was definitely a mistake on his part, but one day of cramped quarters or riding with the luggage was a burden that wouldn't cause any lasting harm. You know that you're going to catch hell when we get back, right? Pops asked as they left the main city and entered the scattered tents of the outer refugee camp. Perhaps I can sell it as looking for a reason to have her sit in my lap for the rest of the trip instead of me being bad at math? Dominic suggested. Alexis didn't speak at first when they arrived back at camp. She just stared at Dominic, waiting for him to explain. You see, it happened like this.
Dominic began.
We met Tenna, and she had all the qualifications we needed for a gardener, both for the food gardens and the decorative. Then we were looking for more workers, and we came across John, who is an experienced carpenter. Just what we needed to rebuild the houses around the manor. But John's family was under debt contract to the Merchants Guild. So, to recruit him, I bought out their contracts. Then the manager suggested Julio here, who is one of their own accountants looking for a promotion. If he works out, he should be suitable as the new castellan. Alexis sighed. I should have known something like this would happen. It looks like it will be a crowded trip. One of the royal guards cleared his throat. If the lovely ladies need a lap to sit on, I don't mind volunteering. John's daughters all backed away, and the guard was promptly smacked on the head by both Colonel Wilkes and Ella at the same time. Serves you right. You don't even know how old they are. Alexis snorted. The guard shrugged. Milady, I don't reckon it matters. I am riding with Wilkes, and he wouldn't let me get away with anything anyhow. Chapter 219. Meet the Maids. John shook his head in dismay. The royal guards would be a going concern around his daughters. However, John did not yet know what his family had done to keep the men away from them before he had caught up to them. They were already in the service of the Merchants Guild when he arrived, and he had made the mistake of causing a scene on the first day he was in town. At which point, the guild refused to let him pay off their contracts unless he paid double. Things only went downhill from there. So, he was unaware that his daughters had all scarred their faces to scare away the men before they were transferred to the VIP lounge area, where they could keep a veil on without anyone asking questions. Tenna set her thick arms over the shoulders of the 4 younger women. If you're that desperate for a woman, why not try with me instead of bothering these young ladies? She asked. The guard emphatically shook his head. Madam Tenna, I'm just a young whelp. I can't handle that much woman. Pops might have the endurance of the forge, but us mere mortals aren't so well conditioned. That made the widow laugh and shake her head. Just keep your hands off the new hires until they're used to guardsmen and their perverted antics. We can't have you scaring them off before we get to the manor. Then Beth, the cook, stepped between them. How about this? Tenna and I will take the center seat in the front of 2 of the trucks, so we don't need anyone sitting in laps. That will give the indoor staff time to get to know each other, and the Lord. The gardener doesn't have anything to do until we see what condition the house is in anyhow. Everyone got into the trucks, and Dominic shook his head in dismay as he realized that all the maids had gathered at the front of the compartment, as far as humanly possible from where Dominic would be sitting. There are refreshments in the chest sitting in the middle of the floor. But that won't matter until lunch, unless you haven't had breakfast yet. Make yourself comfortable. It's at least a full day still until we are at the manor. Dominic instructed as he entered and closed the door behind him. The truck set off down the road, intending to make it past Darden and Castle City before camping for the night. Alexis assessed Dominic's choices for staff. The carpenter looked capable, and his tool kit had been mostly complete, without any essential tools sold off. The accountant had a golden token from the Merchant Guild around his neck, marking a decade of trusted service around their assets. That was enough of a resume and referral to get him a job in any noble house. But there was something wrong with the oldest of the women. "John, why don't you introduce us?" she suggested. "Of course, lady. I'm sorry. I forgot what estate we are going to." John replied. "You were hired by Dominic, the Duke Westover, formerly Dominic Wavemates, which makes me the Duchess Westover, but also the 9th Princess Alexis Cygnus," she replied. John panicked, then nearly fell out of his seat as he bowed to the princess. "Your Highness, forgive me. I did not know. I suspect that the Duke did not wish to speak your name within the city to avoid encouraging ambushers along the way,"
he stammered.
Alexis motioned for him to sit upright. "How about you introduce me to your family, as they seem reluctant to speak?" John had noticed that as well. They hadn't said a word since they had left the Merchants' Guild. "This is my wife, Wendy," John began, then whispered. "Darling, aren't you going to greet our employers?" Wendy silently bowed, and John looked concerned. One of his daughters leaned over to whisper in his ear, and the carpenter silently began to cry. "Perhaps we will hold off on the introductions. Some things are better done in a less crowded setting." Alexis consoled him. One of the girls bowed politely, then spoke up. "Your Highness, I think it would be better if we started over completely. The last few months have not been ones we would wish to remember,"
she suggested.
Alexis nodded. "In that case, I will arrange new identities for you when we arrive at the manor. The Westover Manor is freshly reinstated and has been vacant for some time. So, we will be rebuilding everything, including the farmhouses and the village. You are the first staff hired for the house, but there will be more coming. Were any of you hoping to marry soon? If you are, I can reassign you to ladies' maids when we have a full complement of staff. The position rotates fairly frequently, as the prospective ladies are married off." The new hire hesitated, then lifted her veil, showing jagged scars across her cheeks and her nose. They had clearly been inflicted with a dull tool and left to heal improperly, without treatment. That could actually be treated fairly easily with any of the royal guard's healing magic. But to the average lower noble, or common man, the sight would be shocking. Alexis chuckles. "I take that as a no. But you should catch your, too late, he's out." The girl covered her face in embarrassment, then panicked, flailed her hands for a second, and then picked her unconscious father up off the floor. Nobody had thought to mention their injuries to him. However, it gave Alexis a great idea. Why shouldn't she teach them to fight instead? Once upon a time, Signia royalty had a veiled guard. Women who never showed their face in public and guarded the royal ladies. A few more trained guards around the house was never a bad thing, and embedding them among the staff would make security much quicker to respond to issues. If the ladies showed some talent at combat, she would have the guards start to train them, and then obtain some trade skill cores for them. Chapter 220, All-Nighter. It took nearly 10 minutes before John was coherent again, and then another 2 hours before he was in any state to speak. The pain of the day's revelations was palpable in the carriage, and everyone else tactfully left them to their grief. An agony mixed with relief at their reunion. So, the ride was a silent one, until the sun started to go down, and the driver opened the window to the passenger compartment, startling the maids. "Your Highness, should we continue through the night? If you look outside, you will see that there are refugee camps everywhere, and the farmers have set up a militia to keep their crops from being looted. The situation here on the outskirts of Castle City is far from good, and the rural villages appear to have been mostly demolished by the Dago's army on their way through." The driver asked. Alexis nodded. "Just keep everyone moving through the night. The road gets bad north of here, but the trucks have good lights. We should be able to make it well enough." The driver nodded and closed the window, letting them rest as the sun went down. A few hours later, the drivers stopped to swap positions and to give everyone a rest break. It was fully dark, and they were in a more remote area, without any sign of farmhouses in sight. If they were going to stop overnight, this wouldn't be a bad spot for it, but Dominic got the feeling that they might have someone watching them from the dark. In the dark, not much would keep up with the trucks, as horses would struggle on the dirt road. But if they stayed stationary too long, then they would still be a target for vagrants and thieves sleeping near the road. Half an hour later, they were moving again, and Dominic wrapped his arm around Alexis to keep her upright as she slept against his side. Dawn broke with the truck still moving, and another rest stop, where Beth quickly assembled a quick breakfast of biscuits, jam, and coffee. My apologies, but we are almost to the manor, according to the drivers. I will unpack the kitchen supplies the moment that we arrive and get started on a proper luncheon, she explained. Dominic smiled at the flustered cook. It's no problem. Traveling hard is called that because it comes with hardships, even if they're as small as biscuits for breakfast. At least they're not hardtack. Pops nodded emphatically. Even dunked in the coffee, hardtack is a miserable breakfast. We've all got plenty of work coming this afternoon. Just before noon, the road passed through a forested area, and Dominic pulled the window covering open. Do you need a moment? Alexis whispered as Dominic stared blankly out the window. Dominic shook his head. No, I will go check the area later. Let's start on the manor. If it hasn't been properly cleared, it will be the worst of it all. I just hope that the soldiers who had been stationed here treated the remains properly. The new hires assumed that he meant there had been a battle here during the most recent hostilities, but Pops and Alexis both knew that he was thinking of what happened here 10 years ago. Dominic hadn't buried the bodies before he left, and nobody had occupied the area since, other than one group of Signia soldiers a month ago. The truck stopped in the overgrown courtyard in front of the ramp entrance to the house, and everyone waited for Dominic to exit the truck, so he could be the first to see what was there, without interference. Cautiously, Dominic stepped out of the truck and looked around the entrance. All signs of what had happened here a decade ago were gone, and only some trampled grass remained as a sign that there had been a military unit on the premises. That was a good start. It meant that they had taken the time to at least move the bones away from the door. Slowly, he circled the house, inspecting the outside for any portions in immediate need of repairs. He wouldn't lead anyone inside if there was too much rot or crumbling stonework. Then, when he got around the back, there was one oversized stone cairn with a simple stone plinth marking it as a grave. Good, they buried them properly, Dominic whispered to himself, then continued to circle the building until he was back out front. All good from the outside. Let's get everyone inside and inspect the manor. The soldiers said that it was inhabitable, but we all know that during a rainstorm that word can have a very loose definition to a traveling military unit. Dominic called, loud enough that everyone could hear him. That got everyone moving, and Dominic swung the front doors open, then paused in shock. Everything was intact. Well, all the solid pieces were intact. The drapes had been removed from the windows, the cloth of the sofa was damaged by rodents, and some of the wooden accent pieces were warped with humidity and neglect. It would be a long process getting it all back up to perfection, but in general, the house was exactly as it had been left. Alexis looked around the main hall and nodded in satisfaction. The majority of the building was stone, and all the woodwork was simply decorative trim. It could be peeled away without compromising the structure. Excellent as a fortified structure. Beth and Liz crossed the room and turned down a side hall, which made Dominic laugh. That way is the servant quarters. The kitchen is the other way,
he called.
Right, you've been here before, have you not? The cook asked. Dominic nodded. It's been some time, but I still remember my way to the kitchen. There are 2 floors of rooms above us, and all the office spaces, plus entertaining areas, are on the main floor. Dominic added. Alexis left to inspect the office areas. The royal guard went to the upper floors to inspect the rooms, and Pops ventured off through the main floor to see what had survived. Hey, I've got a locked door here, she called a few seconds later, bringing Dominic out of his reverie. Oh, you found the good stuff. That's the library. The next door over is the main study, and then the smoking room, Dominic explained. All 3 doors were locked, but Dominic knew how to solve that. Give me a moment, and I will see if the keys are still in the house. Nobody would typically have those keys on them, so they should still be in the house. There aren't any signs that looters even visited the place, he explained. Dominic walked down the hall toward the kitchen, and then pressed his hand to the side of a cupboard by the door. The hidden door swung open, revealing the manor's keys, still hung on their hooks. There you go. The spare master key. Keep that one safe. I don't know if we will be able to find the other copies, Dominic reminded her needlessly. After all, who knew better about the value of having the only master key to something than a princess, who always had to worry about spies, thieves, and opportunists trying to get into her valuables?